Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to episode number 2 of Entrepreneur Gains, where I interview Y-Combinator alumni. My guest today is my good friend David, a serial entrepreneur who has started multiple startups in the last few years. One of his startups, Banjo, raised $121 million in funding. Still, he ended up resigning to pursue his next venture, Hackbright Academy, which ended up getting acquired for $18 million. He then went on to found another startup after called BloomJoy, which ended up getting into YC, where I had the pleasure of meeting him. Unfortunately, the startup didn't end up working out as the founders didn't manage their runway well. The experience with BloomJoy, though, led to pivoting into his most recent startup, Fondo, which helps startup founders protect and extend their runway so that they don't make the same mistakes he did. He's also an angel investor and has invested in over 25 startups so far, which brings such an interesting perspective. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for doing this, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I have, by the way, a super random question. This is my first question for you. I checked out your new website, and it's so weird because same day, someone introduced me, my business partner from my new venture, introduced me to this graphic design company, and it's called Storytale. Do you know who they
Oh
are?
yeah, I've heard of
Okay.
them. Yeah.
So they do web illustrations for like startups or whatever. And I went on your
Oh yeah,
website.
yeah,
Yeah, I went on your website
yeah.
and I saw the same animation on your website. So I was like,
It's
that's yeah.
before they launched Storytale, they had a site called Craftwork, and they like launched on ProductHunt, and it was one of the like I love all these like free or like cheap license these cool illustrations, and I thought they were kind of like an underground illustration shop, and so I was like, yeah, hopefully nobody knows that I just
Yeah.
bought these for like $10, but now it's obvious.
No, I think it wasn't obvious because I was actually doing the same thing. I was trying to build my website, and I was like, I don't want to spend like $200 on an illustration. So I just saw that, and my buddy just happened to be the same day send me that link to that website, and there was one in there which was like this guy or this women with a high, and I'm like,
Right,
yeah,
waving, yeah.
yeah,
That's
that
so
could be
funny.
me. And then I saw that on
Yeah.
your thing, which is interesting.
Yeah, no, it's
So
awesome. I mean, I love those things. I mean, it makes it look, they have enough too of a database that it looks, you can look original, which I like.
yeah, makes sense. I want to know more about your new startup, but before that, I want to know like about your story. Like you've done multiple startups now, right? What led you like, to start this particular one? Like that whole journey to getting to here, basically.
Yeah, so my current company is called Fondo. And our mission as a company is to help founders protect and extend their runway, which like, especially now with COVID and everything, everybody is a lot more mindful of their runway. Fundraising is taking a little bit longer. But personally, I'm super passionate about that, about just helping people build successful companies. I'm passionate about like bootstrapping companies as well. And so, the way that we help companies is just getting them accurate financial information every month. So we do their bookkeeping for them, and then also making sure compliance doesn't fall through the cracks. So we do their taxes. So we do bookkeeping and tax for startups, and our mission is to just help them, protect and extend their runway. So that comes into play when we think about how do we price this for startups. Do we do an annual contract up front, or do we charge them monthly? Those kinds of things, like what's most like founder friendly. So we're just getting started. But yeah, all of our customers right now are coming through Bookface. So
Very cool.
it's still pretty early. Yeah.
I remember when I last saw you, which was at Camp YC, you were working on BloomJoy. And then when I saw your startup, your new company, and I saw the website and everything, you said there's a part there you said that in the third company or my third startup, we failed because we did not manage our expenses well and stuff like that, runway well. Is that
Yeah.
how this idea came along? Was from BloomJoy basically?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So it's kind of a combination. Before I got into startups, like 10 years ago, I was actually an accountant. And so I started my career as an accountant, studied it in school. And so like, in all my startups before this, I've always been responsible for like, either outsourcing the accounting or bringing an accountant in-house, building an accounting team, back office team. And with BloomJoy, it became a real problem because, initially we were, on top of it. And then we just sort of, we were growing, and, we thought we were profitable. Everything was good. And we're like, for some reason, we decided it wasn't worth it to invest in outsourcing bookkeeping. And we were just so busy, trying to run the business, we didn't hire anybody else. And so, yeah, we just had this gap of no bookkeeping being done. And ultimately, yeah, that ended up really hurting us because, BloomJoy was basically, we were creating editorial content for media companies. And we were doing a rev share on all the ad revenue that was generated from the content, and all of the traffic, like most of the traffic was coming from Facebook. And so after Cambridge Analytica and, Facebook changing their algorithm, our traffic took like a major dip. And we had hired all this full-time staff to, create all this content. And so anyway, we had a lot of fixed overhead and our revenue just came crashing down. And we also had, the timing of the revenue, we weren't paid for, sometimes 90 days. And so we just weren't on top of like matching our expenses with our cash income. And, we just got to the point where we had very little cash left. And, we didn't have enough left to, pivot the company or, do things that you can do when you realize, okay, we have 6 months left of cash. Like, let's do something. That's almost even too short, but we basically had a couple months left of cash and we're like, okay, we're kind of screwed. And so we tried to sell the company. We went through that process and actually got a couple of offers, and we were really excited about that. And it just ended up falling through after 6 months. And so then we had, pretty much no money in the bank. And, but I decided to actually pivot BloomJoy into Fondo. And so, kind of bootstrapping Fondo now.
Right. Interesting. And it's actually pretty fascinating to me, like with someone like you who had first company, like raise a fuckload of money. Second one, you actually had like an awesome, decent exit, and and that you have crazy accountant experience, even after all that, it's such a crazy thing at the startup world. You don't know, like no matter, like it still happens. It's funny though, or it's crazy to think about that, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, everything is, I feel like as an entrepreneur, you learn so much like every time, and certain things should compound, right? And you should like be better at them, but sometimes there's new mistakes to be made that anybody, even an experienced person, can make. And it's pretty crazy.
It kind of humbles you up though, doesn't it? It's like the start of the world.
Yeah,
that's the fun of it, right? It's like
totally, I mean, everything is fresh, right? Like even if you have a successful company, doesn't mean your next one's going to be successful, right? Like it's always, some things, like I was saying, some of the learnings like sort of build on top of each other, but, you can't control the market. You can't, especially if you're doing new things every time, you can't, start being really good at executing on a new thing.
Yep.
There's definitely a learning curve. So, it's always hard.
What made you wanna, like, as in like your first startup, what made you want to get into the startup world? Like, what was that switch, or what happened that you ended up going that route? Because you said you were working at Deloitte, I think, before, right?
Yeah, that's right. I started a company when I was in college. So when I was in college, there was, I never knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But while I was in college, towards the end of my college days, I joined this entrepreneurship class and was like, oh, wow, like this is really interesting. And so me and a friend decided that we wanted to start a company, and, we wanted to start a company that, that we could start with like kind of no funding. And we brainstormed a bunch of ideas and ultimately came up with a tutoring company. And so we would hire college students to tutor high school students. And so, just learned a ton about entrepreneurship by doing that, like how to hire people, how to get customers and stuff like that. And so I ended up taking a job as an accountant in San Francisco at Deloitte, but ultimately wanted to get into startups. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur at that point. And so, I was like, I'm going to go to a hackathon, or, how do I break into startups basically? And I signed up for this newsletter called Startup Digest. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
I think it's still around. And there was a hackathon that weekend called Startup Weekend, and the theme was like mobile apps. And so I decided to go to that, and my team ended up winning first place. And then I just stopped showing up to work at Deloitte, and then and then we ended up raising a seed round. And so yeah, I quit my job and then I've been working on startups basically ever since then.
That was for Banjo?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And how was that experience? Because you guys like raised what, over $100 million something, right? How much you guys raised? What's the
Yeah.
number?
So most of that has been raised since I left the company. I was there for the first year
Okay.
through our Series A, and yeah, it was it was my first sort of like experience with like a tech startup, and so learned a lot about yeah, just the whole like how to Silicon Valley work. How do you raise money? How do you build a product? How do you like get users? How do you build a team? Um, all of that kind of stuff, which was like it was like I went from like reading TechCrunch and like aspiring to do this stuff and thinking, yeah, I want to go to a hackathon and like break into this world, and then just like you know got really really lucky in like actually getting on a train with a startup like that, and so it was a really good learning experience for me. And then yeah, ever since then I've just been doing startups.
Love it. So actually, I got a question for you because the next one, because you did
Yeah.
after that. So by the way, why did you leave? Like, why did you for the next one?
Yeah, so me and my co-founder just ultimately decided to go in different directions, and so yeah, so I ended up leaving the company, and then he continued to lead the company as CEO.
Yeah, the classic co-founder dispute. I've had one of those too, so I know how that feels.
Yeah, I feel like co-founders, it's always like I think it's rare when you can really have a great partnership last for a really long time, and so it's
Yep.
like I think a lot of founders end up going their separate ways with their co-founders over time.
Yep.
Sometimes it lasts really long, sometimes it's really short, but I think it's just a natural thing. Sometimes, I don't know, for me it has been for every single one of my startups. So maybe there's something wrong with me, but it
No,
seems
I don't
normal.
think it's actually funny though, because I have been thinking about this a lot as well. And even with my new startup now, I did something with my co-founder where like I was like, man, last one there was such a crazy, we were not on the same page because I had different expectations, I had different goals personally, right? Like business was
Yeah,
one thing, but also my personal goals, and I felt the same thing with the other founders, right? And it's not that one person was right or other person was wrong or anything like that. I think it was more like we just never talked about it. I think that's the interesting one. So I think even with the new one now, I legit made my co-founder write down every mistake he has made, everything that pisses the shit out of him in startups. I did the same thing, and I'm like,
that's good.
right, and I'm like, we made a company values together where we were like, okay, these are the things that pisses you off, these are the thing that pisses me off, and we'll keep on writing this list. And if that happens, we need to like let each other know because it will happen at some point. Like at some point we will,
Totally.
like it just yeah,
Yeah,
which I
open
think is pretty
communication
interesting.
is like the number one necessary thing to make it work, for sure.
Yeah. I also made a Slack channel where every week we have to talk about one thing that's bothering us, like personally, like deeply, like kind of like being vulnerable with your
Yeah,
partner. Because again, I think at some point
totally.
you're gonna disrupt and you're gonna have resentment for whatever reason. So I know what you mean. I
Yeah, I
felt
totally
that.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like a lot of, second time founders figure that out, unfortunately it's hard to know that going into it unless
Yeah.
you're like really, really smart and educated about how to be a great communicator. But like being vulnerable, like I didn't even learn how important that was until, you know, yeah, like halfway through my second startup. And anyway, these are just things I feel like you learn on the job, and
Yeah.
so
No,
it's hard to
I learned
really like prevent these mistakes. Yeah.
I learned it in Bali, bro.
Yeah.
I had to go on a spiritual journey to figure that
Oh
out.
man. Yeah, totally.
Okay. so so when I travel, every time I talk to people like who are doing businesses, I always get this question where they're like, why, like, what's the importance of YC? And like I have my own answers, right? Like example would be like chatting with someone like you, right? It's amazing to be able to connect with great people and like have these conversations. But for someone like you who had a startup which raised a crap load of money, then you had an exit which was a great exit, like you didn't necessarily need YC, right? So why did you want to go through YC?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different benefits to YC. I mean, I think I feel like as a founder, like we talked about a little bit ago, like you're always learning, right? And there's like I feel like you can never learn too much. And so being in a community like YC, you get surrounded by all these people who are really smart and who can teach you stuff, whether it's the partners or just like people in your batch, alums like you that you meet at like, random events. Like it's just a really good community for founders who want to like grow as a founder. I think, there's so many different ways to build a startup, right? Like you could bootstrap, you could raise angel round, you could raise a VC round, you could do an incubator, accelerator. And like, I feel like doing a program like YC, you just get so much like lifelong value from the community, and also to help, build your current startup better. So for me, it's kind of like, I think it was a no brainer to like, to want to do it. I think also, because YC is YC, I think a lot of people have had this experience where they wanted to get into YC, they applied and got rejected, and just kept on applying. So that, I applied to YC a few times, and I was like, I still want to do YC with this new company. And so I was glad that I got in and got to experience it. And now, I think the YC community is amazing. Like you said, it's just, it's great.
Would you say it was more for the, at least looking back now, would you say it was more for the personal growth than the company growth?
I think it's kind of intertwined. I consider myself like a lifelong entrepreneur. I think I'm just always going to want to start new things. Yep. And so, I think it was just a great opportunity to learn personally. My personal like entrepreneurial growth. And then, for the company, I think it's definitely super helpful. I think depending on what type of company you're building, it can be more helpful. And so I think for B2B companies, it's, you just have a bunch of early users, right? Because YC is a community of founders of companies, right? So if you're selling something to businesses, like you just have a great community of people to talk to.
Right. Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
What has been your biggest challenge in your startup journey so far? Because you've been doing it for a while now, so you have had a lot of challenges.
I think it's, that's a really good question. I don't know. There's so many. It's like, it's just a roller coaster. Even if I don't know, maybe a roller coaster is a good analogy, because like, even if when the drop is coming, like you still get that feeling from the drop of the roller coaster, right? You still get the rush, from these things, even if what's coming. I think it's the same with starting a company. Like, there's going to be ups and downs, but you're still affected by them. So everything from like, a marketing campaign that goes bad or goes really well, you have those like dramatic emotional swings. And so trying to like disconnect yourself personally from those things that happen with your company is hard. I don't know. I've tried different ways to try to do that or think that I can do that, but then you're just inevitably affected by it. And so you just kind of either have to learn how to enjoy the ride, or like proactively try not to like get too tied up in it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Does it ever get easier?
I don't know. I mean, it's, no, I don't think so. I think I think more, right? You just, more, you're like, but it's still hard to get customers, right? I mean, you learn different strategies and you can try different things. You have more tools, but it's still challenging for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I always think that it's interesting, because I think it's like that feeling of like, I don't know what the right definition of a startup is, but the way I like to think about it, at least something which has not been proven, like as compared to a regular business, which has been proven, and someone has done it in the past, like that particular idea, and all you're doing is you're just coming up with your example. We're starting a restaurant, right? It's like controllable you have is the food, the location, all that stuff, right? But it's been done in the past. Like someone has made a restaurant, people want to eat food. It's the hypothesis is confirmed, right? But right. Startup, you don't, right? And so I find that whole thing of like the rush with the startup, it's such a crazy one, because it's like something which is a challenge, it's this problem solving, where I think only a certain kind of people could enjoy this, like as in that kind of rush of like, like going at it, and it's a lot of failure. Obviously, it's hard, it's lonely, and as you said, unless you enjoy the ride, like in the first one, when I did my first one, like my mindset was only to go chase the money, and it was such a bad ride in that sense. A lot of good came out of it, and there was a lot of growth, but it was such a hard time because of that whole thing. So I'm sure like now that example, the one you're building right now, for example, like you really you're building it because you saw that pain point yourself while in your own startup, and you were like,
Right.
okay, it's going to be fun to build this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like if you can experience, whatever problem you're solving, the closer it is to home, the better, I feel like, because, it is so unpredictable sometimes, and it's really tempting to just say, screw it, I'm going to move on.
Yep.
Maybe I'll try a different idea, or maybe I'll take a break. And so if you really are connected to the problem, you'll be more likely to, persevere, which is, sort of the number one, I think, contributing factor to success with startups is just like kind of not giving up. And so, yeah, I think that's helpful to be really connected to it.
That was Justin Khan's first line when we were in the YC batch. He basically said, "If you survive, you'll thrive." That was his first line to us. I still remember that.
That's pretty good.
Like that's a tattoo material right there. Someone could get it.
Yeah.
So actually, a good question. Would you, if you were to go back, like starting your first startup again, and you're going back, how would you do it differently?
Oh, good question.
Like, would it be the idea, which was the biggest thing for you, biggest like start, like now that you know so much, right? As in like experience wise, right? So yeah, like how would you go about it?
I mean, I think now, I think I definitely think about, the problem. Like, is this something I really want to solve? And is this something that, I mean, is there a big market here?
Yep.
Is this going to be, because a lot of energy goes into these, right? It's going to take a few years to like really get, sometimes you get, lucky, or you're smarter and it happens faster. But, I think generally it takes a few years to really get growing and building something to the scale that maybe you want to. And so, is this something that you want to spend a few years working on? Those types of things, I think, but definitely like, especially, as an investor too, thinking about like, what is the outcome opportunity here? Like, is this, because, you can build so many things that take the same amount of time to build, but have like way different values at the end of that period. So like, is this something that is is this aligned with like what value you want to create, and how big is the opportunity? So those types of things. What are the assets, that you have at the time when you're like going to start a company? What do you personally bring to the table? Is that aligned with what the company is going to be, that kind of thing. So just being a little more thoughtful about all that. And,
yeah. Not being an 18-year-old kid, like, I'm going to change the world. I'm being an crazy, more strategic now, more responsibilities, more like this is my strength rather than, but I think actually funny. I actually watched a podcast with Andreessen Horowitz and Justin Khan actually. And they asked him, I think it was Andrew Chen, I don't remember now, but they asked him that, like why are you doing like Atrium, and that like what is the difference between you doing Atrium right now and you doing Justin TV back in 12 or 14 years ago, whatever that was. And he said, when I was young, my competitive advantage was that I was a kid, I was risk taker, I was I could sleep on a like on like in a bunk bed or whatever, like in couch or whatever, right? I can be more, and I was the kid, I can do stupid shit. But now that I am older, right, my advantage, strength that I do have is I have connections, I have I can raise money faster. And so now I want to go after a problem which is like which is more like it's something not necessarily, because if I was to do a social media company right now, I'll probably get my ass kicked by some young kid who's more hungry than me in that thing,
right,
rather than this kind of challenge which I can actually take on money and like solve those kind of problems, which I think was
totally
pretty cool. Yeah, which I think was pretty cool.
I think that makes total sense. I think it's the same. You just but also when you're younger too, and you have less experience, you I guess it can create more optimism,
Mm-hmm.
which is definitely helpful, to take those big swings.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, one last question regarding this one. Okay,
Yeah.
what would you recommend someone starting their first startup? How should they go about it? What do they need to know?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, I think it depends on what the goal is, you know.
Yeah.
I think about like, why do you want to start a startup? And then I think based on that, you know, there's a bunch of different paths. Um, I think if you want to, you know, start a startup because you want to build something that solves a problem and you want to be successful at it, I think, you know, pick a problem that you personally have experience with, you know, something that you can relate to, something that you have a unique insight on, and that you think you can solve uniquely because of your insight. Um, and yeah, I mean that's a good question. I don't know, man. I think yeah, picking something that you have a relationship with the problem, and then also something that you are confident that you can build the team to build, or that you can build.
Love it. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
And you have been investing now for a while now, right? I
yeah.
saw your awesome LinkedIn profile with 20. How many investments have you done?
Uh,
Crazy.
Thanks, man. I think like a little over 25.
Wow.
Yeah,
So which one's easier? Is it
yeah.
investing in other companies, or is it or working on your own?
Oh man, it's really funny. I think it totally depends on you, you know,
Okay.
on the person, right? Like I found I really like the you know, building something and like solving a problem and being
Yeah.
able to like see the results, getting a feedback loop on whatever you're building by either seeing people use your product or talking to your customers or users, or like, you know, it's a lot more tangible, and it's I enjoy it more. I enjoy it a lot, you know,
Right.
personally. And I think with investing, it's really about yeah, I mean, identifying, you know, finding companies, you know, and then like building a relationship with those companies, you know, sort of winning those companies over to want you to invest in them, and
Yeah.
then like be in that process, like showing your value, like how can you be helpful, and then actually being helpful, you know. So
Yeah.
it's just, it's like, it's very different, and a lot of the times it's it's very compressed, you know, especially around you know, with investing in companies around demo day, you know, there's a lot of FOMO involved, and there's a lot of like um, yeah, it's just a totally different thing. It's a totally different
Yeah.
thing investing in companies than building a company, and it's harder to sort of see the results of your work,
Yep.
if you could call it, you know, work of
Yeah.
investing in companies, because they don't, you know, in terms of like making a return on investment as an investor, you don't know for
Well,
a long time.
yeah. It's
And so a
interesting.
lot, and so a lot of people, I think, do it who enjoy that process of you know, identifying companies and being helpful to them. Um, and you know, but yeah, to do it to make money is really difficult. And so to be a professional investor, you know, I don't know what that's like, but you know, as an angel, it's yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience, and I think I do prefer, you know, the entrepreneurship work more than like investing work.
It's also the control part, right? You have control in your own hands compared to somebody
Totally.
else. Yeah, and it's funny though when like when we like when I had my startup, and it's crazy to think about now. Like you don't respect the money as much competitively, right?
Right.
There's somebody else's money. It's not like tangible, right? But now I feel like if I was to cut my, and I think you probably could feel that now. If you were to cut your first check after you do that, you're like, okay, this is my hard-earned money, right? This is something I worked all like for
Right.
so long, and now probably makes you more grateful and respect the investor money more than anything, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. It's totally a weird it's an interesting job for sure. And but you can learn a lot through doing that too, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any final words?
Yeah, I think well, thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to see this grow. And yeah, I think you know, I think starting a company is a really great opportunity for people to, you know, create the life that they want, create the product they want in the world, and it's a lot more achievable than I think a lot of people think. I think a lot of people are more capable at doing it, and I think, yeah, I wish everybody luck.
Thanks so much, man. Where can people find you and your company?
So yeah, I'm on Twitter at DavJ, and then my website is tryfondo.com.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks so much.